A very good morning and a very warm welcome to the program Law and Order, a program where we discuss legal issues and educate the general public with legal knowledge and certain issues related to the daily life. So today we're going to speak one of the most important topics when it comes to the family issues, which is divorce, and we have a special guest and a thorough gentleman to discuss on this matter, and he is not a guest to us because he's familiar with our programs as well. Senior Counsel Attorney at law, Mr. Ian Fernando.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation. And today, divorce has come to a certain prominent place when it comes to court practice and certain family issues. So simply to start off with today's discussion, can you just explain us a little bit about the family and the legal issues pertaining to the family?
Yes, before you come to divorce, first there is a promise to marry a person, and that promise to marry comes in two forms. We have the betrothal where you exchange letters, or you have the engagement ring passed and that's an engagement, or there is a certain promise to marry on a letter given to one party to another. So if you do not get married to that particular person, writing those love letters, sometimes you can be called for breach of promise of marriage. But the love letter has to state the date on which, before that date, you must get married to that person. Just stating that I am going to get married to you and not stating a date won't be sufficient grounds for a breach of promise of marriage contract to be broken. And I think if a married man tells or a married lady tells another spouse or another party, I love you and I will get married to you, that is not a breach of promise of marriage. Because they are not married and making the promise.
Right.
Coming to the second segment that you said regarding the divorce, divorce is on three grounds in our law. One is malicious desertion,
Right.
sexual impotency and adultery.
Adultery. So, like, can you just further explain us about these main grounds for divorce?
The sexual impotency is rarely seen now because it has to be incurable impotency. With the medical advancement in science, impotency can be turned around, and with psychological treatment and medical treatment, it's very difficult to ascertain a person who is unincurable in that potency, in which case you will have to fortify that by calling a doctor's medical evidence to court.
So, interrupting at the middle. So, when it comes to that incurable impotency, is it at the time of the marriage or after the marriage?
After the marriage, after basically from the time you come into your honeymoon and thereafter. So, if you have been impotent before that and your wife knew or your spouse knew that you were impotent and got married, that might be a bit difficult to get a divorce on that grounds.
Right, that means that totally we can't move out of that thing.
On that issue.
Right, okay. So, the second ground as well, sir?
Second ground is the most common ground, that is malicious desertion or constructive malicious desertion, where one party leaves the matrimonial house because the other party can't live with the other particular party. When you say constructive, you make life intolerable for the other spouse to live by harassing that spouse or by criminal torture, that other party leaves the particular house.
Right, okay. So, that is the basic introduction and the main grounds for divorce. So, we'll talk about that main grounds in detail, and before moving apart, like moving in detail with these facts, let's focus about the other consequences despite of the legal issues of this divorce. So, what are those social arenas as well?
Mr. Charita, I must also construe another point, that adultery is also grounds for divorce.
Right.
How it's a very difficult ground to prove. People think that if you have a spouse taken in your car going up and down to office, or you are working with a particular person, or you are going partying with a particular person, that you are committing adultery. Adultery goes back to the root, as 4 New Law Report at page 106 says. To prove adultery, you have to see and make sure that the date and place of adultery is given, and there should be insertion.
Right.
And that adultery has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt, that is like 100% proof that they were committing adultery. Right. So, that's the third grounds.
Right.
And as you mentioned earlier, the normal other grounds, what construe this to come into this breakdown relationship can be social factors like the mother-in-law influence or financial problems or a third party getting involved with the married parties.
Right. So when comes to those facts, legal issues and social issues, what is the most effective way? If we have a certain issue, basically we have to go to courts and sort this out. So when it comes to a legal issue or when it comes to a social issue, what is the most easiest way to get this divorce done?
Yeah, sometimes going to a counselor and sorting out your marital issues before you go to court is the easiest possible way.
Right.
But most people sometimes think going to court might sort out the problem. That might even aggravate the problem.
Right.
Because the divorce case might take so long. For example, if you don't file a plaint, which is formidable in the law, the opponent can come and contest that plaint and even get a stay order on that in the appeal court, and the divorce case won't move forward. So it is much better to reconcile. There's reconciliation possible before you go to court, and then sort out matters in court, which you can finish it very fast.
Very fast. So the time period exactly?
Maybe 3 months is statutory provision that we have to have. Within 9 months, the latest, you can finish the divorce case.
Finish the divorce case.
And Mr. Charita, I must inform you, there is a particular section in our Civil Procedure Code called Section 72, wherein the plaintiff puts his papers in and says that he wants a divorce. Then the defendant can just write a letter stating that he admits the contents of the plaint, countersigned by his lawyer. There is no necessity even to file an answer. Upon that document being produced to court, you can get the divorce. So it's so simple.
So simple.
But unfortunately, the parties and their advisors make it terribly long and difficult for the parties as well.
Okay, so like with that point, I'm just moving a little bit apart from our basic thing. Basically, when it comes to the divorce, people just say the law is to discourage those divorces. So when it comes to your point, sir, it's very little bit simple. It's a simple task if we get the correct instructions. So what is the comparison in between that?
The comparison is that you have to first find out what the party wants from his divorce. Sometimes it can be amicable divorce. Sometimes the party might want to take revenge on the other party. So at the end of the day, the court will anyway grant a divorce. Either way. Or either your case will get dismissed. So it's much better to know your target on how you are moving and plan out your strategy with your lawyer, how you are going to achieve that, than just wavering around and being like a ship without a rudder sailing in the rough seas of the land.
Right. Okay. So we discussed about the legal issues and the social issues and some facts pertaining to that background. So let's talk a little bit about those grounds for divorce. And so what is malicious desertion?
Yes, malicious desertion is where you do not want to stay in the house and you move out. Now, constructive malicious desertion, as I mentioned, life is made intolerable and you have to move out. The recent judgment set out by Justice Jayawardena states in the case of Gomez versus Gomez, Prasanna Jayawardena J said that if you are dwelling in the same house under one roof and living separately with locked doors, but you are consuming the same food that is made for the entire family, you bring in some other provisions, the other party brings some other provisions. One party pays for the gas, electricity and water, but you are dwelling in the same house, you can't go for constructive malicious desertion. I think there is a great point in that, because you are only living separately in the same house. You have to be away from that particular party. So at the point you are filing the divorce case, if you are living in the same house, having the same matrimonial attitude and rights which you are performing, though you might not be sleeping as husband and wife together, your case will fail. You have to move out of your house.
That means moving out of that house is mandatory. Right. Okay. So what about like when it comes to malicious desertion, is it you have a practice more than 3 decades. So when it comes to your practice as well, what is the most prominent ground that you have come across? Is it malicious desertion?
Common ground is malicious desertion, which you can very easily set out. But in so many instances I have seen in long marriages where it's over 30 years, sometimes the particular spouse comes back to the matrimonial house and gets back, but that doesn't cause any issue in the divorce case, because you had to live as husband and wife together in the house, in the same room. So, after you file a divorce case, if you live like that only, that can be an issue for your divorce case. But just your husband or the wife coming back to the matrimonial home and seeing the kids and spending a little time and getting back doesn't cause an issue in your divorce case.
Right. Okay. So that is malicious dissociation, and we talked a little about sexual impotency at the time of the marriage also. And one basic thing that I wanted to quote is again adultery. Adultery. What is that?
Adultery is a very difficult ingredient to prove. But some parties are of the view that if you are seen with some person regularly in society, or you are playing badminton together, for example, on a badminton court together, are playing mixed doubles as they call it, that might consider to be adultery. That is not adultery. That may be having a friendship with a particular person or a particular lady. To prove adultery is a very difficult task, where you have to prove it 100%, where you have to state and say that both these people are living in this room or in this house and having sexual intercourse.
Right. Aren't there any important case laws with regard to this?
Yes, regarding adultery, it has gone back as 4 New Law Report, page 106. You had to say the place and date of adultery. But there is recent case laws about continuing adultery, where you can say in the same place, if you are living with that particular new party who is committing adultery, that there is continuing adultery.
Yes.
But there are so many defenses now taken. For example, the defense will say that the particular person living in the house, though he is an outsider, is in part of the business that other spouse is having. For example, if he is having a photo company, he might say that is my photographer, and he has given official quarters inside my house, the front room. So then it's very difficult to prove that there is continuing adultery, because he is there in occupation in that front room of the house on the basis that he is employed under you. Right. So there can be so many defenses taken, even if you are living in the same house committing adultery.
That means are there many loopholes there?
There are loopholes that you the legal fraternity will invent and see whether the test will provide. For example, I know a particular client, if he was going abroad regularly with his partner, going in the same airline seats, he took up the position that that particular partner was his nightclub agent who went to see the other nightclubs in the other countries to make a better nightclub in Sri Lanka. So that was the defense taken, and that went through. So just because you are living under one roof, if you are unable to prove why that person is living, then it will be difficult.
That means there are so many ways to protect.
Yes, if you have separate assessment numbers, you can take up the position that that person is there on rent, or that person is paying me a rent, and have a tenancy agreement with that person to say that he is living separately.
Little bit arguing on that matters, like if adultery is happening, so that is true. Although such defense is taken, something suspicious or something harming to that legal spouse is happening. So can't that affected party take some actions against?
You can't stop that person from letting out his house to another person, because if it's that his house and there are two separate assessment numbers and some person is staying there, the opposing party must be able to prove that they are committing adultery inside the house. That's difficult.
That's difficult.
Because that will be annex. And unless you see that person in the annex into your main house and you have proof of that, it will be very difficult to prove adultery.
So
but if, for example, if you go into a hotel room together, or you go to some planter's bungalow together, and you are staying there with your signing the reception book that you are checked in with so and so, that is proof of adultery.
Right. Okay. So when it comes to that proof, when it comes to certain civil cases and criminal cases, there's a difference between proving something. So what is the ground for proof?
In the civil case, you have to only prove 51% probability and chance. As in the criminal case, you have to prove 100%. But adultery, though it's a civil matter, it's not there in the penal code as a charge. You need to prove adultery to 100% to win your case. And it's a very, very difficult task. That is the case law that has been set out in our country, that adultery you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. However, in a country like Japan, if you are condoning the fact that your spouse is working as a prostitute, or that with your knowledge she is living with someone else, then you can't charge her for adultery,
Adultery.
because you have acquiesced in the matter.
Right. Okay. Now, those are the legal and social issues pertaining to this divorce. Simply, for example, a couple is there. They haven't applied for a certain decision from courts to have a divorce, but they live in separately. What is that condition?
Yes, they can live separately, even they can meet together and discuss matters, because the matter is pending in court. Just because the matter is pending in court, it does not mean that they can't talk to each other. Certainly the court will facilitate that. If they talk to each other, the settlement process or the court can come into some adjudication, they can sort out all matters, property matters, child rights, so many things can be sorted out. So there is no necessity when you are divorcing not to talk to your spouse, unless your spouse is weak and does not want to talk to you.
Right. So when it comes to separation and that divorce thing, what is judicial separation and contrast with divorce?
Judicial separation was there in our law, and I think it's still there, but it's not been utilized, because that type of separation was given for a period of time. Like if you are out for 7 years and you are not heard of, that there can be judicial separation, or there is a separation where you are out mens et thero, that is called for 2 years. That 7-year period was taken into consideration long years ago, when you go on a ship to London or some other country and the ship sinks and there is nothing to hear from you. So after 7 years, court will grant you that separation. But now with the advancement of technology and computers and social media and all these electronics, that we don't see in existence. And I have hardly come across a case of 2-year separation, because that is not now the normal procedure, because that gets the spouse or the party nowhere. You can't get married. So normally anyone will want to go for a divorce case to sever all relationships.
So like one major concern when it comes to this divorce issue is the property thing, how property manipulates with divorce.
Yes, Mr. Charity, you mentioned earlier about the children. Let's take up the children and the property.
Right.
In the children, there is a big calamity, because suddenly when you see the mother and father departing company, mentally, psychologically and physically, it's trauma for the children. So you have to look into that area. The custody of the children is given to the father in general. Children under 7 years, which are called culpa incupex, is given to the mother. However, the court is the upper guardian of the children. The children can't decide with whom they should be. Under 18 even they can't decide. Over 18 they may decide, but court will interfere as the upper guardian to see that they have all the facilities that they would have, and want the children to be as normal as they are prior to the divorce. The next question you asked me was how the legal scenario is regarding, that is, apart from the custody. Apart from the custody, there is access given to the children to see the children regularly, so that their mental trauma will be less.
Right. So when it comes to the legal background of children, there is a small thing that you quoted out, that children's consent is not valid there. Will it depend on a certain age limit?
No age limit. The judge will go into the facts and then consider under 18 whom he will give the children to. If it's over 18 also he may suggest, but he has no legal right to order to whom the children must be. Your other question was how the property devolves. Normally when you bring in property as dowry and you are married, when there is a divorce, that is given back. And if you are having joint properties earned during the continuance of the marriage, then that will form part of the divorce settlement, how it's going to be divided.
Right. So if there is a grave injustice for a certain child, still the child's consent is not valid?
Child's consent will be considered but not valid.
Right.
Court is the upper guardian. So what the court decides is final and conclusive. And the court has a right more than the parents, who are only the lower guardians of the children.
Right. Okay, so we had a fruitful discussion about divorce grounds, and we focused a little bit on children as well. So we are going to have another topic and discuss about children, maintenance, custody, and many more. And thanking you very much, Mr. Ian Fernando, Senior Counsel and Attorney at Law, for joining with us with today's program. And still, we have a lot to discuss about this divorce and certain matrimonial backgrounds with law. So stay tuned with this Law and Order program. Until we meet again, pleasant day for you all.